I slammed the front door behind me, exhaustion from a 24-hour shift weighing on my shoulders like a wet blanket. The late-day sunlight slanted through our Echo Park windows, dust motes dancing in the haze. Emma's coo floated from the nursery, and I ached to hold her, even if just for a moment, before worrying about dinner. My stomach growled, but Sarah's absence at the table smelled of stale coffee and tax forms. I dropped my turnout gear by the closet and grabbed my phone from the counter. A new text notification glowed on the screen. "See you at 6, Mason." My grip on the phone tightened until my knuckles bled. Mason Cole, that tax consultant she hired to sort out her audit. I blinked, disbelieving. My vision blurred as the kitchen's muted colors, mottled granite countertop, pale yellow walls, skipped into a kaleidoscope. Mason's name hit me like a live wire. Cold sweat prickled my spine. I scrolled up the message thread. Earlier texts from Sarah described audit progress and late-night spreadsheets, but this was a personal signpost, blazing with betrayal. My pulse thundered as though trapped behind my ribs. Outside the window, the low hum of traffic continued, oblivious to the storm erupting inside me. I dropped onto a bar stool, the vinyl seat squeaking beneath my weight. My coffee, black and bitter, sat half-finished on the counter. I took a sip, the metallic tang burning my throat. In that instant, months of oddities ricocheted through my mind: Sarah's late, audit meetings, at a Highland Park cafe, her forced hush when I asked if dinner would be on time, the strange shipping address where Mason's company received shipping crates of client files. I remembered how she blamed my firefighter schedule, those 24-hour shifts, for her exhaustion, as though I were the culprit of her every sleepless night. But now I realized her genuine refuge was not in paperwork, but in Mason's arms. I caught movement beyond the kitchen's opening, Sarah slipping through the back hall in a hurry. Her face was pale, eyes avoiding mine. I stood, knocking my bar stool over, heart hammering like a boiler. "Who's Mason?" I asked, voice raw. She froze, eyelids fluttering. The glow of the afternoon sun painted streaks across her cheeks. "M. Mason is just my tax consultant," she stammered. Tyler, it's not what you think." I laughed, but it came out hollow, like air escaping a punctured airbag. "Not what I think." My voice thundered, every echo a verdict. "See you at 6, Mason." The words clenched my gut tighter than any belt. Sarah backed away, hands splayed, like she was bracing for an impact. In that moment, a theme crystallized, the desperate juggling act that drained us both, her trying to balance newborn Emma, the weight of our mortgage, and my unpredictable shifts as a firefighter. She'd leaned on Mason's calm expertise to navigate her audit, but that professional reliance mutated into something more. Each Highland Park lunch, each late-night spreadsheet session, had become an excuse to slip into his arms. My jaw ached as I reeled. The laughter I once heard in the nursery now felt like a mocking echo. My duty to protect, and to serve, shattered against the truth of her betrayal. The smoke of our shared dreams rose in bitter plumes, leaving me choking on ash. Sarah's tears shone in the half-light, but I felt only fury. "You used Mason to escape," I said through gritted teeth. "You left Emma and me at home, alone." The cracks in her fabrications lay bare. She whispered apologies that stung my pride worse than any fire. I turned away, stumbling toward the back porch. The cool air hit me like a rebuke. Emma's crib stood silent through the window, her small face pressed against a bunny-soft blanket. I swallowed, blinking back the burn of tears. Enough. I slid my phone from my pocket and tapped on a new email draft. Subject: Audit Error Revisited. In the body, I began listing carefully: Mason's mismatched invoices, the suspicious redirection of payments, the unlicensed financial advice he gave her in private. I added details I'd unearthed: his billing records that contradicted her client files, the forged letterhead on his certified recommendations. With each keystroke, the bitter tang of revenge mingled with the hard sting of betrayal. My heart still pounded, but I felt the first spark of resolve. I would make Mason pay for every stolen moment he shared with Sarah, and I would reclaim my life and protect my daughter from the wreckage they left behind. As the afternoon sun dipped below the rooftops, I hit send on that audit update, sealing my first act of retribution. The night would come, and with it, a reckoning that neither Mason nor Sarah would see coming. I remember the first night I brought Emma home from the hospital, Sarah holding our tiny daughter close, the soft scent of baby powder mingling with the antiseptic tang of the neonatal unit. I carried in 2 bags, one for diapers, one for groceries, while she balanced Emma in her arms, tears glimmering with equal parts exhaustion and joy. Our Echo Park loft felt too big for 3, but in that moment, it was alive with possibility, endless nights of lullabies, Sunday mornings filled with pancakes, and a future we'd build together. I watched Sarah straighten baby blankets on her glider, her cheeks flushed with new mother pride, and I felt a fierce surge of gratitude. "You two are my world," I whispered, pressing a kiss to her forehead. In the months that followed, our routines morphed around firehouse calls and midnight feedings. I'd leave our bedroom at 6 a.m., kiss Emma's head, and head into the station, hose stretched over my shoulder, adrenaline pumping as sirens wailed. At home, Sarah juggled client portfolios and tax statements, her laptop perched on the kitchen counter while Emma gurgled in her bouncy seat. We slipped into a fragile dance. I'd return smelling of smoke at odd hours to change diapers and soothe our daughter, and Sarah would greet me with a grateful smile before diving back into her Excel sheets. Our dinners were often microwave dinners eaten over spreadsheets, her whispered apologies barely piercing the hum of our life's chaos. I recall the first time I felt that pang of doubt. It was late spring, just after Emma's first month. Sarah said she had an impromptu audit meeting with her new tax consultant, Mason Cole, at a Highland Park cafe. "Just a quick lunch, I promise," she'd said, squeezing my hand before slipping out the door. I watched her walk down the street in her tailored suit, stiletto heels clicking against the pavement. She carried a stack of client files in one arm and Emma's diaper bag slung over the other. Something in her stiff posture nagged at me, but I forced a smile. "Bring me back a sandwich," I'd said. "I'll be here if you need anything." She came home 3 hours later, breathless from traffic and clinging to an empty coffee cup. I asked how the meeting went. She flashed me a quick grin and ducked into the nursery to feed Emma. But I couldn't help noticing that her expensive black pumps had faint scuff marks, nothing from dragging office files, more like from pacing. I noted it but passed it off. Maybe she'd rushed from one part of the cafe to another. When I peeked at her messages later that night, I saw a string of texts between her and Mason. "Thanks for the insight today," and "Let's review the numbers again." No red flags yet, just tax jargon and polite exchanges. Over the next few weeks, these lunches became routine. Sarah's audit updates stretched longer, sometimes into evening phone calls I didn't hear until I returned from the station. I'd come home, weary and soothed by thoughts of baby coos, only to find her at her desk, lit by the glow of her laptop, murmuring into the phone. I'd wait in the doorway, shoulders tense, as I heard snippets. "Yes, that adjustment makes sense," or "Can I swing by your office later?" I never pressed her for details. I told myself she needed support. I'd watch her brush hair from her face, exhaustion shadowing her eyes, and a protective anger would ripple through me. I just wanted our little family intact. Small signs piled up, a receipt for coffee at 11 p.m., labeled Highland Park Cafe. She'd said she was editing client reports at home. A shipping box addressed to Mason's tax firm that arrived one evening, when she'd told me she was out offering family financial planning advice to another client. I confronted her about it once. "Why is Mason's office receiving items for you?" She laughed it off, smooth as silk. "He sent me new audit templates to review. I asked him to drop them off because I was tied up with Emma." I let it go, but suspicion gnawed at me. Each excuse chipped away at the trust one had in her face. One night, I followed her to the cafe, unthinkingly, heart buzzing like a furnace. I parked 2 blocks away and watched as she met Mason under the twinkling patio lights, their heads bent close over coffee. They looked like conspirators sharing secrets, leaning so near their whispers could have been private vows. The sight twisted my stomach into knots. I wanted to storm in, demand the truth, but I stayed hidden in the shadows, breathing shallow and cold. Instead, I watched her reach across the table, her hand casually brushing his as she laughed. That laugh wasn't mine anymore, and the pain stung sharper than any burn from my gear. Putting the pieces together became a silent quest. I scrolled through bank statements and found charges at the cafe at odd hours, far beyond any audit meetings, she claimed. Late-night Uber receipts piled up beside her laptop. My brother, Christian, a divorce attorney, listened sympathetically when I admitted my fears. "Document everything," he said. "Print out those receipts, save her messages, even record conversations if you can." I hated the idea of turning my wife's life into a case file, but I feared losing Emma more than I feared confrontation. A mutual friend, Javier, casually mentioned seeing Sarah and Mason leave a restaurant late one Saturday night. They looked cozy, man, he said, shrugging as if it were harmless banter. But to me, Javier's words sank like stones in a grave. That Sunday, I faked a family lunch at my mother's in Plano, and instead, I dug through Sarah's nightstand. Beneath her high-starched pajamas, I found lipstick-stained coffee lids labeled Mason. Each clue tightened the noose around me. My trust unraveled until all I saw was betrayal. And yet, I continued to play the supportive husband, because I needed proof. I endured her distance, choking down the bitterness of doubt as I watched her slip out for audit consultations. Every time I kissed Emma's soft cheek, I promised her I'd protect our future, even if it meant exposing the darkest corners of my wife's life. The cafe receipts, the late-night texts, the whispers from friends, they were all brushstrokes painting a picture I didn't want to see, but couldn't unsee. So I gathered each fragment, letting suspicion grow into conviction. Sarah's refuge was not in spreadsheets or motherhood, but in Mason's arms, and I was racing to uncover the full truth before my world crumbled completely. I spent the next morning haunted by the memory of Sarah and Mason's hands brushing over that Highland Park cafe table, and when I walked back into our Echo Park loft, Emma's soft coos greeted me from the nursery. I scooped her into my arms, calming her with gentle bounces as a fierce protectiveness coiled in my chest. I knew I had to respond strategically, to shield Emma's future and to confront Sarah with incontrovertible proof. Settling her into her bouncy seat, I closed the nursery door and found our kitchen counter littered with yesterday's takeout containers and Sarah's abandoned coffee mug. I wiped away crumbs with a rag and set out a clean notebook, determined to lay out every step I needed to take. First, I gathered physical evidence. I rifled through Sarah's work bag. She'd tossed it on the dining chair when she returned late last night, and found 2 lipstick-stained coffee lids from Highland Park Cafe tucked into a side pocket. I slipped them into a small Ziploc bag I'd lifted from the grocery shelf, labeling it in block letters, coffee lids, 417, 422. Next, I unlocked Sarah's phone. Her fingerprint had registered her as the trusted user, and I knew its passcode by default, and navigated to her iMessage history, searching for Mason. One by one, I screenshot each flirtatious late-night exchange. Can't wait to see you, lunch at 2. Back corner table. I backed up the screenshots to a folder on my encrypted laptop, then printed them on our home printer. The warm hiss of each print felt like confession growing under my fingertips. I logged into our joint bank account online and scanned the statements, noting multiple charges to the cafe at 11:15 p.m., long after any legitimate audit meeting could have ended. I printed the relevant pages, circling each cafe charge in red ink and jotting Sarah's charge with Mason beside them. I placed these pages in the same evidence bag as the coffee lids, sealing it with masking tape labeled Evidence Number 1. That stack of documents made my resolve roar to life. I would not allow Sarah's deceit to go unchallenged. That afternoon, I called my brother Christian, a divorce attorney in Marietta, and explained the situation in as calm a voice as I could manage. He invited me to his office that evening. I left Emma with Sarah's mother. She'd come over under the pretense of helping with errands, and drove to Christian's office. The building was hushed, walls lined with leather-bound law tomes and polished oak shelves. Christian poured me a cup of decaf coffee before I laid out my evidence, printed iMessages, bank statements, coffee lids. He flipped through the documents with a steady hand, nodding thoughtfully. "You've done well gathering this," he said. "First, we'll need to file for temporary custody so Emma's welfare is secured. Next, open a separate bank account for Emma's expenses, daycare, medical bills, and living costs, ensuring Sarah can't divert funds." He emphasized that I should draft a preliminary petition for divorce, citing adultery or at least inappropriate professional relationship, but hold off on filing until every detail was nailed down. "If she catches wind of how prepared you are, she may try to hide assets," Christian warned. He handed me a business card for Dr. Laura Mendel, a family counselor specializing in infidelity. "Sarah and Emma will need guidance. You should see someone too, you're carrying heavy guilt and anger." I tucked the card into my wallet, feeling a flicker of relief that I wasn't alone in this fight. On the way home, I stopped at Best Buy and bought a small Wi-Fi-enabled security camera, HomeGuard 360, legal as long as it's visible. I set it atop our kitchen pantry shelf, aimed at Sarah's home office door, and configured it on my phone to send motion alerts after 9 p.m., her usual audit prep time. Its lens recorded in crisp 1080p, capturing any clandestine nighttime meetings. The final flash of its red indicator light felt like a sentinel watching over our crumbling trust. That evening, I delicately searched for more proof and found a hotel receipt in the side pocket of Sarah's briefcase, 2 nights at the Ritz-Carlton uptown, dated a Tuesday. She'd told me she was burning the midnight oil for audit drafts at home. I printed the receipt and added it to my evidence bag as hotel stay 4/12/13. Holding that slip of paper, I felt a stinging betrayal. The safety of our family had been bartered for stolen nights in someone else's arms. With evidence mounting, I opened our local Wells Fargo branch on Friday morning, while Sarah was at the firm, requesting a sole owner checking account. Under the fluorescent lights of the nearly empty lobby, I provided my identification and transferred a quarter of our joint savings into Emma L. Stevenson Trust, instructing the banker to set alerts for any withdrawal over $100. She handed me a leather checkbook cover engraved with E. L. Stevenson Trust, a symbol that Emma's future would no longer be vulnerable to Sarah's reckless errors. On my phone, I set up automatic transfers of half my monthly firefighter paycheck into the new account. I printed the confirmation and tucked it into my folder as Emma's Trust, 5 of 3 deposit. That Saturday, I brought Emma to UPS while Sarah was at an evening audit meeting. With Emma in Javier's care, Javier being my friend from the firehouse who'd volunteered to babysit, I met a notary at the store. I handed over my custody proposal and printed texts for notarization. The notary stamped each page with a red seal, State of Texas, County of Dallas. Standing there, the note of that final click felt like cement sealing my resolve. I labeled the documents, custody proposal, notarized May 9th, and slipped them into my evidence binder. Back home, I spread every piece of evidence on our dining table: coffee lids, bank statements, hotel receipts, printed texts, Dr. Mendel's referral card, the notarized custody proposal. I opened a blank document and typed a carefully structured custody plan: primary physical custody to Tyler Stevenson in Echo Park Loft, supervised visits for Sarah at her mother's home for the first 3 months, joint decision-making on healthcare and education, daily FaceTime for Sarah, supervised visits to transition to unsupervised weekends contingent on no further evidence of misconduct, holiday and vacation schedules to be determined by best interest of Emma. I signed and dated it, Tyler Stevenson, May 6, 2023. This plan was my blueprint for safeguarding Emma's well-being. On Monday, I walked into Christian's law office with Emma strapped to my chest in her carrier. He reviewed my evidence binder and nodded with approval. He began drafting the divorce petition on grounds of adultery, meticulously citing inappropriate professional relationship with Mason Cole, and drafted a motion for temporary orders to secure primary custody. Each form, Cause No. DF 23456, in the Family Court of Dallas County, Texas, in re. The marriage of Sarah and Tyler Stevenson, bore our names, turning our private pain into public record. Christian stamped each petition with the court seal. We agreed to file the petition on Wednesday at 8:30 a.m., and arranged for Sarah's service that evening via a professional process server. As Christian signed the last page and handed me a stamped copy, he said, "You're ready. She'll know you won't be intimidated." Standing outside the courthouse on Wednesday morning, the Texas heat felt like a trial by fire. Clutching my evidence binder and Emma's squirming form, I walked through the marble pillars to file the documents that would irrevocably change our lives. My confidence had grown with each notarized page, each recorded text, each strategic step taken in the dark hours of doubt. I realized I was no longer flailing in a sea of suspicion. I charted a course toward Emma's security. As I left the courthouse, Emma nestled against me, cooing softly. I felt the first flicker of peace. The days ahead, temporary custody hearings, property division, potential courtroom drama, loomed large, but I knew I had built a fortress of evidence. Sarah had sought refuge in Mason's arms. I found mine in the certainty of my plan. Each legal form and notarized sheet fortified me for what came next, a reckoning that would protect my daughter and reclaim our shattered lives. I arrived at Christian's law firm just before our scheduled meeting, the late afternoon light slanting across the polished wood floors. Sarah sat in the corner of the conference room, eyes rimmed red, hands folded in her lap. On the long table between us lay my evidence binder, coffee lid stamped 4/17 for 20 seconds, printed iMessage screenshots, bank statements circled in red, and that hotel receipt from the Ritz-Carlton. Christian offered her a sympathetic nod before turning to me. Let's review, he said softly. I took a steadying breath, opened the binder to Exhibit A, and slid the coffee lids toward her. These were found in your work bag, I said, voice quiet but firm, the same one you carried back from Highland Park Cafe. I tapped the label, imagining the lipstick smear still on the rim. Sarah's gaze flickered to the lids, her shoulders sagged slightly. I turned the binder to Exhibit B, screenshots of her SMS exchanges with Mason. I tapped my finger on the first message, can't wait to see you tonight. These texts were sent between 10:30 p.m. and 1 a.m., I said. You told me you were finishing the audit. Instead, you were exchanging affection with him. My voice held no anger, just measured accusation. I watched her eyes glisten. Sarah opened her mouth, but I raised a hand to pause her. Please let me finish. I flipped to Exhibit C, the bank statements, pointing to the late-night cafe charges. These withdrawals correspond to your audit meetings, yet the timestamps match when you claim to be at home with Emma. I saw her lips tremble. And Exhibit D, I said, pulling out the Ritz receipt. You said you spent 2 nights editing tax drafts. But instead, you were in Uptown with Mason. I set the receipt beside the others, the page flicking like a fallen leaf. Christian watched quietly, then slid me a photo of our wedding day, Sarah beaming in her white dress, me holding her hand as we vowed fidelity. I picked it up, running a thumb over the edge. I held this in my pocket that night, I said, voice breaking. It symbolized our promise. Now it's the same promise you shattered. I placed the wedding photo on Sarah's side of the table, where it lay between the evidence, a stark symbol of our broken vows. Sarah's mouth quivered. Tyler, she whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. But no apology could stitch our lives back together. I closed the binder gently, each click echoing like a judge's gavel. I'm filing for divorce, I said quietly. I have primary physical custody of Emma, and I'll protect her from this deceit. Sarah nodded, too exhausted to speak. Christian stood, handing her a tissues. We'll draft the final settlement terms, he said, voice solemn. As I left the firm that evening, clutching Emma in her car seat, the wildfire of betrayal still burned in my chest. Yet beneath it, I felt something steadier, resolve. I glanced at the Highland Park Cafe in the distance, its windows dark now as if admitting their part in my ruin. But I crushed the memory of that inferno as I carried Emma toward our car, knowing that, though my trust had been scorched, I would rebuild our life from the ashes. I stood on our Echo Park porch, Emma cradled in my arms, as the final divorce decree settled on the coffee table inside. Sarah had agreed to the settlement. I received sole physical custody of Emma. She would have supervised weekend visits at her mother's home for the first 3 months, transitioning to unsupervised Sundays thereafter. We split our remaining assets. Her boutique advisory practice went to her, my firefighter benefits and the loft went to me. Child support was set to cover half of Emma's daycare and healthcare costs. When I signed the last paper in Christian's office, relief flooded me. The legal battle was over. That afternoon, I came home to find our loft rearranged. The nursery walls, once painted in soft pastels for 3, now glowed a serene blue above Emma's crib, her name spelled out in white wooden letters. I knelt beside her, brushing a wisp of hair from her forehead as she gurgled back at me. "Daddy's here," I whispered, pressing a gentle kiss to her cheek. In that moment, the ache of betrayal eased into something like peace. Over the next few weeks, I carved out new routines, morning breakfasts of oatmeal with honey for Emma, then firehouse roll calls, followed by midday trips to the park playground. Evenings became my time to write in a journal, notes about billable hours saved, updates on Emma's milestones, and reflections on my own healing. Friendships resurfaced, too. Christian invited me to weekly poker nights to remind me that life could go on beyond legal filings. Javier, my firehouse buddy, often brought over dinner, and we talked about runs, family, and the absurdity of it all. On Saturdays, I escorted Emma to story hour at the community library. She sat in a tiny chair, engrossed as the librarian read about friendly dragons. Between pages, I felt a surge of pride. No longer trapped by Sarah's deceit, I had the freedom to be the father Emma deserved. When she toddled toward me with a crayon drawing, I scooped her up, ruffling her curls as she giggled. I also began mentoring new parents at the firehouse, teaching them how to balance shift work with family life. I shared lessons learned: communication is vital, and hiding truths only breeds greater pain. Our station lounge became a gathering place for rookie firefighters whose partners worked long hours, and I offered advice on everything from child-proofing the living room to setting up joint checking accounts for unexpected expenses. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the rooftops, I sat on the porch with Emma asleep in her stroller. I opened my laptop and drafted the first post for a blog I titled, From Ashes to Anchor. I wrote about rebuilding trust, prioritizing a child's well-being, and finding strength in vulnerability. My fingers hovered over the publish button as I pictured other betrayed spouses reading my words, perhaps finding hope in my story. I clicked publish, and the screen shimmered with encouragement from friends and strangers alike. A final sense of closure washed over me. Sarah's chapter had ended, but mine continued, rooted in Emma's laughter, guided by lessons learned, and anchored firmly in the promise of a new beginning.